Here is how to write the perfect law school personal statement that could get you to any schools you could possibly think of. Whether you're trying to get into Ivy League schools, whether you're trying to get into top 10 schools in the US, Canada, or anywhere really, you have to have a fantastic law school personal statement. Now, the challenge is most students don't even know how to start. The ones that start don't even know what to write. They don't know what to include, what to exclude. And of course, the most painful part is you could have perfect stats, but if your law school personal statement reads weird, you're never even going to get to an interview stage if the school has interview stage. If it doesn't have an interview stage, you're just going to get a rejection letter within 10 seconds and the game is over. So, it's obvious how important it is and why a lot of students stress over it, but I don't think it's necessary. So what we're going to do today is we're going to teach you specific strategies based on what we have learned here at BMO on how you should draft your personal statement. What are the red flags you should avoid? And then we'll do an example to wrap it all up just to see how this good example compares to all the strategies and red flags that we're going to talk about. Before I do that, a quick introduction. My name is Beruz Momeni. I'm the CEO and founder here at BMO. I'm joined with Zhenya, who is our content manager here at BMO. So Zhenya, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first maybe start with the tips that I have in my mind. I'm just going to run through the tips and then we'll go and quickly explain them one-on-one. And maybe you'll also notice that there are some tips that I've missed out that you could also highlight as well. So here's my top 7 strategies to write the perfect law school personal statement. And you know what? Actually, I have a bonus 8th strategy as well that I'm going to give at the end. So stick around. So here they are. 1, you have to do a sufficient amount of brainstorming to understand what are the dots and how to connect the dots for your personal statement. Tip number 2 for your law school personal statement is you have to make sure you're using actual personal experiences, not something generic you read online. It's called a personal statement after all. Tip number 3 for your law school personal statement is to stick to maximum of 1 to 3 points for the entire personal statement, not everything you've ever done. Tip number 4 for your law school personal statement is you have to write an absolutely fantastic introductory paragraph, and the most important sentence is your introductory sentence, and we'll explain why. Tip number 5 is the fact that in your law school personal statement, the body paragraphs or paragraph have to solve those cliffhangers that came about in the intro. If they don't, you haven't done your job well. Tip number 6 for your law school personal statement is you have to provide specific examples. Again, examples and stories rather than generic statements. Tip number 7 now is I've rounded off fingers in my hand, of one hand, I guess I should say. You have to write a concluding paragraph that absolutely leaves the reader wanting more and want to get to know you, want to invite you for an interview, whatever that is. And tip number 8, my bonus tip is you have to write this like you're writing this for a 5th grader. Nobody likes fancy words, especially if that's not how you actually normally talk, right? So, Zhenya, maybe we could go over these. Some of these are pretty straightforward, so I don't want to spend too much time on each point. Do you want to go through these one by one, or do you just want to freestyle this and give us your tips as you go along?
I think we can certainly expand on some of these points.
So first one was, brainstorming. How would you brainstorm?
Brainstorming, and I think what I'm about to say will help with many of the points that you already mentioned, but your law school personal statement must really answer one important prompt, is why law? That's what your personal statement has to showcase, why you're choosing to pursue law as a career and why you're a great fit for law. So when you start brainstorming, you can keep that prompt in mind. Even if your school doesn't give you a prompt for your personal statement, that's the prompt you should always keep in mind. Why law and why you're pursuing law, why you're good for it. So when you're brainstorming, think of experiences, events, your background, biographical maybe events that lead you to believe that you're a great fit. What prepared you for law? These events do not have to be exactly law related. Like you didn't, it doesn't have to involve working in a law firm. It can be immigration, it can be, parents, health, so maybe divorce, maybe something cataclysmic that happened in your life that, led you to pursue law. So that I think, that touches upon many of your points. So of course, brainstorming number one. Take some time to really reflect on what kind of events and what kind of circumstances led you to pursue and develop interest in law.
That's what you said.
And of course, I absolutely agree with, while you're brainstorming, this is the first step, but really your intro and conclusion are just the most important parts of the personal statement. So we can expand on that, and we'll give you an example later, but those are the things that you have to really, really work on, which is why you need to give yourself a really long time to prepare.
Yeah, and I think some of the worst introductory sentences you could have, that if you want a guaranteed rejection letter, write this: I've always wanted to be a lawyer because I want to help people. Guaranteed rejection.
Absolutely.
In
Absolutely.
fact, if the admissions officer doesn't reject you, you should ask him why, because it's
You should
surprising.
not go to that school at all.
You shouldn't even go to that school. If you don't get rejected with that, you shouldn't go to that school, because you should be like, oh, I can't believe that. This is what everybody and their pets write when they're not prepared and they're weak applicants. If you're a weak applicant, you could write that. If you're a strong applicant, you actually want to get into a school that matters. Anybody, first of all, because there's a couple of issues with that. One is, if you're saying, I want to help people, this could be in any context, a lawyer, a doctor, whatever. If that's why you're doing it, it shows your absolute lack of knowledge about life and world. If at this stage of your life, you think you have to be a lawyer to help people, and that's the only thing, and that's why, you're just lost. Sorry, you're lost. Bye.
Absolutely.
I think we give some examples, but like some of the ones I have read is, they start, I like to start. These are the ones I like. Take me straight into a story, right? Ask a question that makes me want to read more. Where is this person going? A controversial statement. Those three things are usually my favorites. That's how I want to read anything. It's like, you either gonna take me back into a point in time in history where you start by a date. You're gonna turn me to in a story. You're gonna take me into a controversial moment or a statement, something like that. Anything outside of that usually just doesn't. Oh, don't create the wheel. I wouldn't recreate the wheel unless you majored in creative writing. Don't recreate the wheel.
And I think that actually speaks to one important, tip that also the writers always have to keep in mind. Your law school personal statement has to be a narrative. It cannot be a list. It cannot be, I did this, I worked in this law firm, I did, this, articling or something like this. No, it has to be a narrative, a story about you. It's a personal statement. It's your kind of journey to become a law school student. Therefore, it has to be really personal, vivid. It has to include examples about your personal, academic maybe too, your academic life as well. But it's really, really about your motivations, which are usually personal for everybody.
And speaking of personal, the other thing we said, stick to 1 to 3 points. I actually like the ones where the person sticks to one story and tells me, hey, Here is what caught my interest. Here is where that led me to solidify my decision. And this is how I end up learning about it. And this is what brings me to this moment right now. Those are usually my favorite. And they can be crafted just for one story. There must be one story. Everybody has a story. That's why, a lot of times, sometimes, at BMO, admissions team, when they sit with students, sometimes students say, you know what, I got my draft. I'm ready to, no. You don't have your draft. You don't know what you're talking about. There's a reason you came to us. So you don't know what you're talking about. You don't have your draft. We don't care about your draft. We're going to start first with a brainstorming to see what is your story, what are the dots, how are you going to connect the dots from beginning to end. And if you cannot have one, I would say maybe max 3, but I still like 1, to be honest. I just want to talk about one thing during my law school personal statement if I was applying to law school, and that's it. Because the reason for that is you have a short space. Admissions officer has a very short fuse. I'm not saying that in a derogatory way. It's just because there's tens of thousands of, depending on what school it is, there's tens of thousands of applicants. They just don't have time for you. They don't really care about you until you impress them. If you're gonna be doing 17 different stories, you're not gonna impress them because they don't even understand. It's not enough space to explain that story. So how can you have 5 different things I'm gonna explain? I think this will come about once we do our example at the end. Any final thoughts before we go into, I guess, our red flags?
I think yes, with the length and using 1 versus, let's say, 3 examples. Of course, it is ultimately up to you. You can make a great law school personal statement with 1 experience, and you can make a great law school personal statement with up to 3, I would say, up to 3. And why that's important, as Baru's already mentioned, you will have space to add details, give us the real story. Absolutely. And remember, most law schools also give you the optional essays, which is if you think you really want to talk about something, but you don't really know how to fit it in your personal statement, you can always opt out for the optional essays, like diversity essay, for example, or another sort of optional essay where you asked to add something else that the committee should know about you. So don't try to put everything you think is related into 1 essay. You will have other opportunities to discuss those things.
Makes perfect sense, because one of the things you said, the reason for keeping this personal statement really focused is it allows you to tell your stories with details. Details are what make a story interesting. As a lawyer, details are so important. Imagine you're in front of a judge, you're arguing a case, and now you just you sound just boring, yes, facts are all good, but the difference between a good and a great lawyer is those details that you're now, for example, presenting in front of a jury. Right? This could be a criminal case. This could be a civil case. This could be a commercial case. It's the details that the jury needs to know to be like, punitive damages, right? Because law is very, it's, as much as you got laws that are set in stone, not more or less, obviously we got case law and they keep changing. So it's not necessarily set in stone either. They're created in a way that you could change them over time. But when you're, focusing on a case-by-case situation, you're essentially focused on the circumstances to try to prove the point. Most cases are not straightforward. It's like, I'm going to read the law. Okay, it was a traffic light. You went through a red light. Okay, so that's it. The end. That's not how most of them are. Even a traffic light has if-then, right? It's knowing the details and being able to explain that. In your personal statement, when you could do that, they're going to be like, this person could write really nice, examination reports or briefs or, statement of claims, statement of defense, or they could go and write and do a really nice, trial because they got the details. So I think that's essentially some of the major things you gotta pay attention to when you're writing your personal statement. Now, what are some of the red flags you gotta pay attention to? So here's 6 law school personal statement red flags you need to avoid. Law school personal statement red flag number 1, typos, missing instructions, not answering the questions being asked. For example, it's an optional essay and they're asking you a question and you're being a politician instead of answering the question. Red flag number 2 for law school personal statements. Poor grammar and spelling. Need I say more? I don't think so. Law school personal statement, red flag number 3. Lack of preparation and proofreading. It looks like you've submitted something last minute. You wrote it last night. There is like no coherence. It just doesn't make sense. It's obvious. It's your first draft. Red flag number 4 for law school personal statement. It's listing everything you've done in your entire life in that personal statement. Again, not understanding the fact that you're going to stick to just one topic and tell your story and just thinking it's a resume. Law school personal statement, red flag number 5, lack of proper flow. So I go from one paragraph to the other paragraph, and it absolutely makes no sense how you jump from one idea to the other. There is no coherence. And lastly, law school personal statement, red flag number 6, generic, boring, no real personality or originality injected in that law school personal statement. You can become a lawyer if you can't, just write a simple 1,000-word personal statement that you've had literally maybe 4 years, 3 years, let's say 3 months, 1 month, you still couldn't write a nice one. These would be my sort of red flags. Any thoughts about these red flags, Jenny? Any other ones you want to add to it?
I think you covered the most important ones. And of course, I think what unites all of these red flags is the fact that your law school personal statement has to be, as we already mentioned, it has to be about why you're pursuing law. If you're not prepared, if you didn't brainstorm enough, if you are just outlining vague, generic examples or reasons like, I believe in justice, that means nothing. That gives us nothing about you. We don't even know what that means. So it is a really personal story, and it takes time. So I would say, if you're preparing your law school personal statement, give yourself at least 6 to 8 weeks to really redraft, ask professionals or somebody you trust to read through it, give you notes, give yourself a lot of time, because this is not going to be done overnight, for sure, not even in a week. Sometimes it takes weeks to prepare a really solid law school personal statement.
I would agree with that. Timing is very important. Of course, is there exceptions? And you could be a fantastic writer, and again, like, you know what, you have a master's in creative writing and you've already been thinking about this. So yes, there's always outliers that could write it in a week, in a day, yes, there's always outliers, but to be safe, start earlier. Don't be sorry, be safe, right? Better safe than sorry. Everybody says that, but nobody actually understands what that means when it comes to practice. So the other thing I want to say, if you're watching this and it's, you have a week or two, don't panic. Obviously, you could still do it. You could get some help, and that's what help does. Help usually accelerates this and reduces the time you need. So don't panic. Obviously, panicking is the worst thing you could do, and hopefully these tips are going to help you. But maybe the best thing for us to do now, Zhenya, is if you could maybe choose an example for us to read, and then we'll see how this person did compared to our tips.
Absolutely. So the example of personal statement that I will share is, I wanted to emphasize a couple of things. For example, we spoke about a strong introduction. So I'm going to read the law school personal statement example, and you guys just note a lot of the things that Baruz and I have spoke about during this podcast, and you'll hear what we're talking about, and this will be exemplified in this sample. So here we go. In my home community, the belief is that the law is against us. The law oppresses and victimizes. I must admit that as a child and a young person, I had this opinion based on my environment and the conversations around me. I did not understand that the law could be a vehicle for social change, and I certainly did not imagine I had the ability and talents to be a voice for this change. I regularly attended my high school classes because I enjoyed the discussions and reading for English and history, and writing came easily to me, but I wasn't committed to getting good grades because I felt I had no purpose. My mindset changed as I spent time with Mark Russell, a law student who agreed to mentor and tutor me as part of high school at law school mentorship program. Every week for 3 years, Mark and I would meet. At first, Mark tutored me, but I quickly became an A student, not only because of the tutoring, but because my ambitions were uncorked by what Mark shared with me about university, law, and his life. I learned grades were the currency I needed to succeed. I had attended mock trials, court hearings, and law lectures with Mark and developed a fresh understanding of the law that piqued an interest in law school. My outlook has changed because my mentor, my teachers, and my self-advocacy facilitated my growth. Still, injustices do occur. The difference is that I now believe that the law can be an instrument for social change, but voices like mine must give direction to policy and resources in order to fight those injustices. Early in my mentorship, I realized it was necessary to be in the world differently if I were to truly consider a law career. With Mark's help and the support of my high school teachers, I learned to advocate for myself and explore opportunities that would expand my worldview as well as my academic skills. I joined a Model UN club at a neighboring high school because my own school did not have enough students interested to have a club. By discussing global issues and writing decisions, I began to feel powerful and confident with my ability to gather evidence and make meaningful decisions about real global issues. As I built my leadership, writing, and public speaking skills, I noticed a rift developing with some of my friends. I wanted them to begin to think about larger systemic issues outside of our immediate experience, as I was learning to do, and to build confidence in new ways. I petitioned my school to start a Model UN and recruited enough students to populate the club. My friends did not join the club as I'd hoped, but before I graduated, we had 2 successful years with the students who did join. I began to understand that I cannot force change based on my own mandate, but I must listen attentively to the needs and desires of others in order to support them as they require. While I learned to advocate for myself throughout high school, I also learned to advocate for others. My neighbors, knowing my desire to be a lawyer, would often ask me to advocate on their behalf with small grievances. I would make phone calls, stand in line with them at government offices, and deal with difficult landlords. A woman, Elsa, asked me to review her rental agreement to help her understand why landlord had rented it to someone else rather than renewing her lease. I scoured the rental agreement, highlighted questionable sections, read the Residential Tenancies Act, and developed a strategy for approaching the landlord. Elsa and I sat down with the landlord, and upon seeing my binder complete with indices, he quickly conceded before I could speak. That day, I understood evidence is the way to justice. My interest in justice grew, and while in university, I sought experiences to solidify my decision to pursue law. Last summer, I had the good fortune to work as a summer intern in the Crown Attorney's Office responsible for criminal trial prosecutions. As the only pre-law intern, I was given tasks such as reviewing court tapes, verifying documents, and creating a binder with indices. I often went to court with the prosecutors, where I learned a great deal about legal proceedings and was at times horrified by human behavior. This made the atmosphere in the Crown Attorney's office even more surprising. I worked with happy and passionate lawyers whose motivations were public service, the safety and well-being of communities, and justice. The moment I realized justice was their true objective, not the number of conviction, was the moment I decided to become a lawyer. I broke from the belief system I was born into. I did this through education, mentorship, and self-advocacy. There is sadness because in this transition, I left people behind, especially as I entered university. However, I'm devoted to my home community. I understand the barriers that stand between youth and their success. As a law student, I will mentor as I was mentored, and as a lawyer, I will be a voice for change.
Very good.
So here
So
we go.
I think the very first thing I'm going to tell you guys as you're watching this is you should go back to our tips, listen to what the example was again, keep going back and be like, oh, okay, you see some parts. So some of the parts I liked versus the parts I didn't like. The parts I liked was, there was stories that related to advocacy and justice, and they were not just said. So there was more of a show, don't just tell. So that was good. Second thing was this was a lot of stories. It wasn't, this is what I did not like was the fact there was too many stories, but it was stories. It wasn't listing their CV or their resume or a list of activities. I like the introduction, how we went right into a story. I enjoyed how it ended and closed the loops. I would have, this was obviously a standard 1,000-word personal statement or so. But to me, if I was an admission officer, this was too long for me. It becomes too long. Remember, they got 10,000 of these to read. This 2 minutes is too long if I have to read 2 minutes.
I would say I agree with you, but one important note about your law school personal statement, stick to the word count that you were given. Most law schools might not even give you a word count. So give yourself about, 750 words would be ideal. And regarding, the uses of examples, there is an advantage to using more than one. You can do this with one example for sure, but what this does is shows growth and your development in your interest, right? So you went from this total hesitation and suspicion of law to, getting to know someone who introduced you to law and this person you admire, obviously. And then you get involved in these, smaller kind of demonstrations of how law works. So there is an advantage to using more than just one example. It kind of showcases how you develop the interest. I think you can really do it with one example as well. You can do that with how you started an event or an experience and how it ended for you. You can definitely show growth in that. But, if you do want to use more than one example, just be careful. Yeah, be careful to give us those details like this statement does.
I agree. There is sometimes an exception. What if you don't have a story that's going to tell you everything? So what is it supposed to do? The story is going to tell us what piqued your interest. Remember, what later solidified your decision, and what did you do to learn more during that process? Sometimes you can't do that with one story. You don't have one story. So the reason this personal statement worked, obviously we gave you a successful example. The reason this one did work is because the stories are somewhat connected to the overall theme of the personal statement. So we go and we do those things. This piqued my interest. This is how, solidify my decision. This is what I did to learn more, blah, blah. This is all, it was connected, but not in one story. So that's why it worked. Yes. Because yes, there's a possibility you may not have one story. It's possible. I think with this, you should be able to put all the tips together. So to, I guess, wrap it up, make sure you brainstorm and have a story that's personal to you. And if you can, stick to one story rather than more than that. B, the language you use, try to keep it simple, just like you saw in our example, instead of fancy. Avoid the red flags we mentioned. And lastly, make sure you do multiple rounds of proofreading, not just by yourself, because you're going to start becoming blind to your own writing. You need others, preferably people who are not your family and friends, that are not worried and shy about telling you what's wrong with your personal statement, to tell you exactly how it is, so you could keep making it better. You need to do it as many times as you can. I think that wraps it up for me. Any final thoughts, Jenia?
And my last tip for law school personal statements is, if you're applying directly to a school, check out the school's mission and their website. Some schools have, of course, unified. Most schools will have unified systems of some sort. But if it doesn't and you're applying to a specific school and it's your number one choice, for sure, check out their website and their mission, and try to brainstorm experiences from their mission.
Perfect tip. Well, thanks for watching another episode. If you enjoyed this, go ahead and share it with a friend who may be applying to law school as well. Also, don't forget to subscribe on whatever social media channel you're watching this. And thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.